I thought I've got a chance. But the Secret Service, they had me.
Can you go back in your mind and tell me what you're thinking at that point?
I stole Scott's identity.
His name was Gary Lee Sullivan, which was, in fact, one of his 30 or so fake IDs.
Just to be clear, because it took multiple tries to describe this to Zack. This is a video about a Dateline episode that was done on me back in 2007. So wow. This is not a new Dateline episode. This is, I had taken off. I was on the run for like 3 years, and Dateline had done a 1 hour, well, it's like a 45 minute TV show on me. And I just recently got a copy of it, and we are reviewing it. So Zack and I are going to review it, and I've watched it half-heartedly once. Zack's never seen it.
I've never seen it.
I watched it when I was incarcerated.
Really?
Yeah, when I was I watched it when it came out live, and all the guys are like, half the guys are like, "Dang, man, yeah, ooh, and I'm sitting there, and then people are saying stuff. I'm like, "That's not true. That's not true."
And that's what you're thinking?
Yeah.
So in 2007, you'd been on the run for 3 years already?
2000, I got arrested in the very end of 2006. Yeah. So I'd have been up. So in 2003, I took off on the run.
Oh, the Dateline came out in 2007.
Right. Because I remember I basically was thinking I'm going to leave the country because I knew they were doing this Dateline. So I watched the first version of it after I'd been arrested. 6 months I'd been arrested. They came out with one.
Right.
Then they interviewed me. They came and interviewed me, and they recut it. This is the recut version. So there were 2 1 hour Datelines.
Wow. This is the after arrest version.
And
the full story.
Yes. After after I was incarcerated and they interviewed me, they then went back and recut the original episode with this one. Okay. And then, of course, a couple of years later, they came out with American Greed, with an American Greed one.
All right. So this is what they consider the full story.
This is Dateline's version
of the full story.
Which is, this could go back, which is highly skewed based on my co-defendants. Really was their lawyer's version of their case. They're trying to get a lesser sentence. They're trying to say all kinds of stuff like, oh, he's a horrible person and he this and that. So it's kind of geared toward that. It's really not that bad. Like when I first saw it, I was horrified. Right. But when I first got arrested, they're calling me a con man in the newspapers, and I'm like, I'm not a con man. And then you kind of 4 years later, 3 years later, you're like, yeah, that was accurate. Yeah. You're not ready to face like the things you did. You've justified them to such a degree that you're like, I'm still a good person. Like, nah, you're not really.
An all-out hunt to catch a thief.
I believe he's a genius.
He's a master of disguise and of the $1 million scam. Cars, homes, diamonds, and cash.
It's a chess game, and every time he walks out, it's checkmate.
And his partners in crime? A string of young mothers with big dreams, drawn into his shady schemes.
Hold on, stop. A string of young mothers?
Listen to me. At this time, and I'm sure you remember this. Do you remember, how they have certain periods, right? Like there'll be like 5 or 6 years where they push something, right? It'll be like what do we say? Like something in the collective, right? Where they kind of put single mothers was a big buzzword back then. Single mother. We have to protect single mothers. We have to look out for single mothers.
Yes, I kind of remember that.
That was during this period of time. So the buzzword was that I was going around. This is what they're saying. That I was going around and I was finding single mothers. I was a Don Juan. I was a fat, short, balding Don Juan. Okay. So
like the long hair in one picture. But
yeah, I know. Oh, the pictures are horrible. So I'm a Don Juan that's convincing these women to fall in love with me. I then convince them to commit fraud for me. I then steal all the money. I leave them to go to prison.
Yeah, but where are they getting the string? Did they ever go past, what's her name, Hauck?
No. They do interview Allison Arnold.
Was she a young mother that they got in trouble?
Yes,
a
she
single
was.
mother?
Yes, she was.
Okay, well, there might be a two is a string.
No, there's not. There was also a girl named Jana Pote, had no children. I dated if
She's
during
a
this
single would-be mother.
during this period of time, if I dated, let's say 2-year period of time, I dated at least 10 or 12 girls. A couple of them had kids. First of all, do you know any women that are in their 30s that don't have kids?
Yeah, I know one or two, but I mean, hey. But listen, a string.
You're not helping at all.
It's amazing what they consider a string.
Anyway.
I had diamonds, I had a Rolex. He just gave me cash for whatever I wanted. Like Prince Charming, I thought.
Was he Prince Charming or a wolf in designer clothing? While he made off with the loot, they were left holding the bag.
I wanted to die inside because I knew everything was going to be
That's the
It's
Tennessee
a crime
mother?
that plays out like a
No, that's
best-selling
Allison Arnold.
book because he wrote the script himself. Could investigators ever find him?
I remember thinking, I can't do this.
Keith Morrison with Thief of Hearts.
Thief of Hearts. That's a movie, bro.
On ID, I'm Lester Holt. This is a story about one smooth criminal. He was a master at wooing women, especially single mothers, accused of using these unsuspecting victims to wrangle millions of dollars from them. And for years, he managed to stay one step ahead of the law. When it comes to pulling off scams, this guy wrote the book. Here's Keith Morrison.
Keith Morrison. This guy.
Little do they know. Tampa.
He parked his car in long-term parking. Christian knew the FBI would find it in a few days. Christian picked up the $4.5 million in cash and waited in line to board a 14-day cruise.
It's the ultimate taboo to give away the ending to any book.
Christian leaned against the railing and watched the shoreline slowly disappear.
But this book ends with a fugitive con-man on a Florida cruise ship carrying a bag with millions in cash.
I don't remember that story.
So I wrote...
This is the first arrest. Is that what it is? The one that you're on supervised release for?
No.
I don't remember this.
No, I didn't. None of this happened. This is a book I wrote. I wrote a book called The Associates.
Oh.
So what had happened was I had been reading a lot of John Grisham, right? Not really reading it. I would listen to it. Remember books on tape, books on CD. So I would listen to the audio version of lots of books. And I remember I used to think, this guy's making being a lawyer sound exciting. And it's not. I know plenty of lawyers back then. None of them said it's exciting. So, and I thought, if he can make that sound exciting, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book called The Associate. Now, it was just a manuscript. Give it a few people read it. I never let anybody. A few people read it, but I never tried to get it published. Anything, and literally, at some point, it'd been read a few times. I really didn't know what else to do. There was no self-publishing, no Amazon self-publishing back then. It was in 2000. I wrote that book in like 2001, and I remember I took it and I put it in my credenza drawer. Stuff piled up on it.
Didn't think about it
again until suddenly articles start coming out about how this con man wrote about his life before it happened. Well, it was as much my life as the Pelican Brief is John Grisham's life,
right.
Or the Partner is. You know what I'm saying? Like John Grisham's is a lawyer who writes.
Right.
He writes about what he knows. I wrote about what I know, but what I knew. And what they did was they said this was a blueprint of what you were going to do. But it really wasn't.
I remember you telling me that. And anyway, the fact that you never did most of that stuff doesn't matter.
No, they don't care about that. Listen, were there similarities? Like, it's so funny too, because they're like, I said like, and the guy's name was like Christian Locke. And, it was always, they said it was Matt Cox, but just a little bit better, a little bit taller, a little bit smoother.
Ahead of the angry throng giving chase. But is this book fiction or fact? As you're about to see, there are truths in this tall tale as bizarre as any novel.
He felt like the modern day Robin Hood. He would steal from the rich and give to the poor. That was his thing, and I believed in him.
Oh.
Are you gonna do this the whole time?
No. She believed in you, man.
When a hard-charging 20-something named Matthew Cox
Poor
began
Allison.
making a name for himself as a mortgage broker.
I always used to say to him, Matt, you never come across as a
Who is
salesman
that?
to me.
Scott Cugna was a
Scott
bank
Cugna.
rep who thought the mortgage business a strange fit for Cox. For one thing, Cox was severely dyslexic. And he'd heard Matthew's stories about the special schools he attended where teachers told him he should work with his hands, that he wasn't smart enough to do anything else. So Matthew Cox had studied art at the University of South Florida, working on sculptures and developing a passion for, even an obsession with, painting.
And he always had pictures he would show me when I came in his office. And,
Artistic guy.
Very artistic.
But now Cox the artist was attacking the mortgage world as he attacked his canvas and his life, as if he had something to prove.
So corny.
And remarkably, the man whose friends wondered if he could even read.
Look how
Where
round.
I know. Where did they get all those pictures?
I don't even have those pictures.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Did they get it from your mom? Where did they get them?
Fiction.
This is early Facebook and MySpace. Would you have them on there?
No, I never.
They had to have gotten them from your family.
Matthew Cox.
Christian J. Locke was 29 years old, stood only 5'7" tall, dark brown hair, suntanned skin.
He did show it to me, and straight from Matt's mouth, it was just about a guy that was going to basically go around the country committing mortgage fraud. And
By the way, it's not what happens. I never said that because that's not what even happens in the book. He's now saying, because I'm now at this point when he's interviewed, I'm on the run going around the country committing fraud. So he says that, but if you read the book, the guy never leaves Tampa. You know, like
Except for the cruise.
No, that's at the very end. He like gets away, which clearly
makes it unsimilar.
You,
Go
to
ahead.
be honest, you don't even know if he gets away. Like when he gets away, the way I end it is he's kind of like as Tampa's disappearing, it leaves it so that you think that the FBI may have figured out where he was going. But he also leaves a ticket for the girl that he's in love with, and she's telling him, I'm not coming with you. But he leaves a ticket anyway. So at the very end, as Florida or Tampa is disappearing into the sunset, someone walks up behind him and says, hey, hi, Christian. And he says, something like, whatever. I've been waiting for you, or I thought you might show up, something like that. And you don't know, is that the FBI or is that the girl? People would read it. They'd come, as soon as they'd read it, they'd come and they go, bro, who shows up at the end? Is it the chick or is it the FBI? So I was like, oh, I got something here. But here's what's funny about Scott. I stole Scott's identity. I cashed $400,000 in his name. And so I feel bad about that. Okay.
Of course,
I feel bad about that. It's wrong. And I've tried to apologize to Scott. I contacted him on Facebook, and then I had somebody that knows both of us met his wife, and his wife said, he was like, he said, Matt Cox is out, right? Has Scott talked to him? She goes, no, he's tried to contact Scott a few times, but he didn't want to talk to him. So I've tried to say like, hey, bro, I'm sorry. And I kind of want to know what happened, because my understanding is what happened when eventually I think the Secret Service shows up to his house. No, I think at that point, it was the Secret Service. They show up to his house and they go, hey, do you know this person? They show him. He goes, yeah, that's Matt Cox. And they go, have you heard from him? He's like, no, why? And they said, well, he just cashed $400,000 worth of checks in your name. Opened up multiple bank accounts and cashed the checks in your name. And he was like, holy shit. And they were like, can you tell us anything? And I remember the Secret Service agent told me, she goes, we asked him, can you tell me anything?
Right.
And he said, yeah. He goes, he's going to be extremely hard to catch. He said, he said he is one of the most creative mortgage brokers I've ever met in my life. And he's going to be very hard to catch.
Wow.
So this is that guy. This is Scott Cugna. So when I tell the story about actually cashing checks and stuff in his name, this is him.
and then sail away.
What did you think when he told you about the book?
Well, I kind of knew.
Knew, he says, because from the day he met Cox, word was out in Tampa's everyone knows everybody mortgage world that something, well, slippery was going on in Cox's office.
He just knew because other people in the business would talk. Well, you know how Matt's office is. If you need a W-2, he'll make it always appear. If you need someone's social security card, he'll make it appear.
So he wasn't just bending the rules, he was breaking them all.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And just how badly Cox was breaking the rules became clear in the spring of 2001, when a warrant was issued for his arrest.
I had
First arrest,
come to
right?
his office, and people had told me, they're like, man, the cops were just here. Matt was just literally ran out the back door, jumped over the fence. And,
None of that happened.
Jumped over the back fence.
I can't get over a fence. I'm 5'6".
Worried.
It was clearly a rogue office.
Oh, absolutely.
Suddenly, that novel Matthew Cox had written didn't sound so far-fetched. He was facing state and federal charges. What had he done?
For starters, he assumed a fake identity to get an $80,000 mortgage.
Wow.
Pleaded guilty to
So I got
conspiracy and
three
grand
more.
theft. About 3 years probation, was ordered to stay out of the
Mortgage business, which might have been the end of our little story, except the convictions did not stop Matthew Cox. Well, he didn't work as a mortgage broker, not exactly, but he was certainly back in the business. He called himself a consultant.
That's the way to ease back in.
Living on the edge, said his friend. He was a skydiver, a daredevil who on the ground skirted the law, honed his schemes. He was able to fake good credit to buy literally dozens of Tampa properties, including this apartment building.
Hey, I should live there.
Cox left his distinctive mark in great swatches of vibrant color, painting huge murals all over the walls.
Wow. Is that stuff still there, you know?
Yeah.
And then, secretly, leaving almost no mark at all, according to investigators, he used his building like a burglar's tool. Again, using a false name, he filed fake documents to make it appear it was paid off.
He was a mortgage broker.
Borrowed $1 million on that property.
It's reported Cox took out mortgages on this building worth nearly $1 million, 5 times what it was worth. And then, Cox turned his charms on this young woman.
He said, all you need is someone to believe in you.
Her name was Allison Arnold. She was 29.
Will you stop?
Aw. She needed someone to believe in her.
Stop. What are you doing?
I'm trying to exaggerate the narrative because
the first time I met her, she had a loan. So it was another mortgage company. They called me. They said, listen, we got one of our brokers is trying to close a loan. We've sent it to like 5 different companies. We can't close it. We don't know what to do. Can you come by?
right.
So this is me as the consultant. I drive by. I go, give me the file. I look at it and she walks in. She goes, hey, look, I don't know. I've done this and this. I boom, 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 boom. And I flip it, da, 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 da. And I said, it's the appraisal. And she's like, yeah, why? I said, you guys got someone to boost the appraisal. The comps are too far, blah, blah, blah. And she said, right. I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And then I explained to her what to do. Bam, 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 boom, send it to Mortgage Warehouse. It'll close. At first, I tried to get her to give me the file. And I'll give you $500 because I knew I could charge like $5,000. And she tears up. She almost starts crying. She's like, you don't understand. I've been working on this I can't just take $500. And I was like, all right, here's what you do. And then she closes it. Like a month later, she calls me. She's like, oh, really? It was 2-3 weeks later. She calls. She's like, oh my God, I closed it. I can't believe it. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to thank you. I'm like, well, I have an idea. Like, let's go to, you want to go to lunch? So we go to lunch. I flirt with her. She tells me, listen, I'm like, let's go to dinner. And she's like, I'm married. I'm like, how married are you?
Oh my God.
I know, a scoundrel. They were in the middle of a divorce. They were just still living together. So whatever.
How married are you? I mean, can money, but go ahead.
The judgment.
Absolutely no judgment.
She's very sweet.
I'm just commentary.
The real problem is, as sweet as she sounds, she really is. She's just a very sweet person.
Oh,
I know. I feel bad.
I know.
Listen, I still talk to her.
Oh, well, good.
And let me tell you how funny this. So when it all comes down to it and she's indicted, like she knows she's going to jail, they don't arrest her right away. They're still looking for me. They're hoping to get me and I'll give them everybody, right? But they can't find me. She gets so frustrated. She goes to the U.S. Attorney's office and says, I just want to plead guilty. I just want to plead guilty and go to jail. So She pleads guilty. They sentence her to like 30 months or something, no, 21 months or something. This is how naive she is. She calls Conman Women's Camp. So the camp she's going to go, she calls and says, I'd like to arrange, what do they call it? Like a tour.
Right.
And they go, a what? She said, I like to arrange a tour. I got sentenced there. I have to turn myself in a few months. And I'm nervous about where it is and how things work. So I'd like to come and get a tour of the place so that I just feel more comfortable about what to expect. She goes, can we arrange that? And they started laughing. She goes, they started laughing and they went, no, Allison. They said, you don't get a tour. When you get here, we'll let you know how things work. And she said, like a month or two later when I showed up, she was literally, when I showed up, they said, oh, Allison, how are you? And she was, do I know you? And they said, no, but you were the only person in 15 years that's ever called here and wanted a tour. So we do know of you, right?
Oh, so they've been laughing at her for months.
But she's, come on. She's unequipped for prison. Yeah. All right.
And she did
2003 and miserable. Marriage on the rocks, young son to care for, her big dreams drowning in a sea of debt.
He said, you could work for me. I'll pay for you to get your mortgage license. I'll pay for you to get divorced. I'll give you money for an apartment. I'll rent it for you. I'll furnish it. You'll be set. You can start a new life. The offer was on the table.
What did you do?
I took him on his offer.
Of course.
I dropped my panties.
Her husband and joined Cox's office as a loan processor.
They were already
But
getting
Matthew
divorced.
Cox as a lover? That lasted about a week. The
That
real
hurt.
relationship, it turned out, wasn't about sex or romance. There were lessons to be learned.
He loved going to the movies.
What kind of movies did he like?
Anything to do with like criminal activity.
People only know what you tell them, Carl.
Catch Me If You Can. He loved that movie. We went and saw this movie, The Italian Job.
There are two kinds of thieves in this world. The ones who steal to enrich their lives, and the ones who steal to define their lives.
Allison had seen how shady Cox's strategies were and how successful. She was intrigued.
He said that he wanted to help me in a way that would make me loyal to him.
Never said that. I've never said that in my life.
Maybe during sex. Come on, just give it a chance.
Me to do the illegal mortgages.
And she convinced herself it wasn't actually bad, not evil. They were more like Robin Hood, Cox told her. The big fat insurance companies would cover the losses. Nobody would actually get hurt. And so she was, willingly, sucked in. Allison rented this home, forged a deed, and then, just as Cox told her he'd done again and again, filed phony paperwork to get 3 real mortgage loans, borrowing nearly $400,000 against a property she didn't even own. Then she bought a house under a fake name and, incredibly, the Social Security number of her own young son.
Oh,
You must have known
that's
that
not
what you were
true.
doing was not just shady, but really illegal.
I knew it was illegal.
But it still felt like nobody was getting hurt?
It felt like nobody was getting hurt, yeah. And Matt did it, and he got in trouble twice for exactly the same thing that I did. Exactly. So I thought, okay, there's a risk, but the risk to me was I'll have a felony and a $1,000 fine. Okay, but I'll make $250,000. I didn't think it was a big deal.
There they were, she thought. Bonnie and Clyde, real estate division.
Oh.
But soon, she says, he began to make her feel that she wasn't quite good enough, or smart enough, or attractive enough to play the role.
He said, you're pretty in a trailer park kind of way. He's like, we're going to buy you some boobs. I said, no.
They're going to buy you some boobs?
I don't recall that exactly. It does sound like something I'd say, but not in a mean way.
You think she was pretty trailer park way? She looks beyond trailer park.
Yeah, she's
pretty.
she's very upper
You got
middle
her
class.
breast?
No, I never got her breast. That's what I don't understand. Like that's what I don't understand. Like that never happened. I may have joked around about the trailer park thing, and that is something I will joke around about. but in a loving way.
By the summer of
course.
2003, Matthew Cox had left a colorful mark in Tampa, Florida, from the murals that sprawled through his apartment building to his manuscript for a novel about real estate fraud.
If everyone was going to treat him like a criminal, then it was damn sure time he started acting like one.
Then there were his dozens
Back
of
to your book every
mortgage-matched
time.
homes and buildings, his Audi TT sports car, and designer clothes. And by Cox's side was a woman who thought she was living the fairy tale dream, Allison.
He felt like the modern day Robin Hood. He would steal from the rich and give to the poor. That was his thing, and I believed in him.
Of course, Allison Arnold wanted to believe, enough to succumb to his advances, leave her husband, and break the law. As she says Cox had taught.
But what does she do beyond, I guess, the first mortgage?
Then pulling out hundreds of thousands of dollars and leaving lenders holding the bag. She wanted it. But was he able to make your life successful?
No. He always just paid my mortgage. He just gave me enough to make a car payment.
So I guess you still had your office at this time.
No.
Oh.
Her son? Didn't matter to him.
He liked feeling like he was living in a movie. He wanted me to be the Bonnie and Clyde with him. He's like, why don't you just leave your son?
It never
And I said,
happened.
No, I can never leave my son.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Surely he would understand that. She was, of course, wrong.
It was apparent that if you were not with Christian, you were against him.
And here
Untrue.
was the consequence. Allison had been replaced.
He answered my ad. He was very charming. It was funny.
That's
Matthew
not,
Cox
you didn't meet her
found
online, did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
okay.
not Allison. That's Becky.
Becky, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what's funny is like they say one that Allison and I dated for a week. So I dated for a week, and during this whole period of time, I ran a scam with you. You borrowed $400,000.
And
I got you a house, got you an apartment, got you a house, did all these things, made your mortgage payments, made your car payments, like did all of these things.
Right.
You got no money. You bought a house, and like. And then at some point I said, I need you to leave your son and come with me on the run. I didn't even need to go on the run. I wasn't even in trouble at this point. I'm on probation, but the FBI's not coming. So that doesn't even make sense, but it's fine.
Yeah.
I get it. You're going to be sentenced. You're trying to get sympathy.
And they build up the story. Like they're trying to make it dramatic.
Well, and I
like
was gonna
going
say-
back to the book you wrote. Like come on.
Yeah, we've heard enough. But I get that maybe they're taking out a sequence. Maybe she said that differently. But by the time I never asked her to go on the run with me that I could recall. There was no reason for. I was already dating Becky. I didn't even ask Becky to go on the run.
I know.
She showed up when I was packing my bags and begged to come with me.
I'm curious if she admitted that she wasn't asked, that she wanted to go.
No, she doesn't, bro. Of course. It's designed to make me look as bad as possible. Not that I need to look all that good, but accuracy. I'm just concerned about accuracy. That's all.
On Match.com, where right away she confessed she was new in town, a single mother with a son named Bryce, that she was on the run from an addiction to video poker.
Yeah, Becky.
No, Becky.
She was insecure. She was vulnerable. She was perfect. He took her to dinner. They hit it off. So what did Matthew tell you that he did?
He told me he owned his own company. He had about 20 people that worked for him that thought he was a god. They all wanted to be his friend.
Rebecca was dazzled. When he asked her out again, she said, of course. He took her to a movie, Matchstick Men.
You're a con man?
Con artist. Flim flam man, matchstick man, loser, whatever you want to call it.
He couldn't wait for us to get out of the movie. He said, that's small potatoes. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he proceeded to tell me he was on probation for mortgage fraud.
When he told you that, what'd you think?
Well, I thought he was on probation. I thought, okay, he said, this happened 2 years ago. I'm almost off.
But he's talking about how he breaks the law.
I know. I know. I thought, who am I to judge? Everybody has a past.
There was something about him irresistible, and he seemed to see just what he wanted in her.
He hit me hard and fast as far as like whining and dining me.
Do you think you seemed needy?
How many days did you guys have?
He got to know me more.
We did it about a month and a half before I went on the run.
Okay. I'm thinking it was like 2 weeks or something.
And he was going to let us, he and I live in a condo, and let my son live in the one below it by himself. And
What? Come on. That doesn't even sound like something you would say.
I know. I had
We
diamonds.
barely
I had
know
a,
each
you know,
other.
a
We
Rolex.
barely know each other.
He just gave me cash for what I wanted.
That
My
seems-
Prince Charming, I thought.
Rebecca Hauck was mesmerized by these amazing stories. How to beat the system, get rich, and not hurt a living soul.
And he told me that his friend and him would create people. He'd make up a name, make a fake social security number, and so they would go get all these credit cards in these names, buy all this stuff, and never pay it.
You must have realized it was not legal.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I did.
And was that not a problem?
It was, but by the time he started approaching me with this, I was so consumed with him.
Rebecca Hauck says she believed every
I mean, listen,
word.
let's be honest.
And
With
so-
that I believe. That I believe. You've seen me. I mean,
I
I'm
know.
pretty amazing.
So consuming that you couldn't even get rid of her. Go ahead.
Elevated about wealth like she'd never experienced before. Neither she nor Matthew Cox, apparently, was aware that around Tampa a buzz was growing about federal investigations. The law was on Cox's trail
law.
once again. And then one day, a tip-off.
Someone who wrote for the paper sent his partner an article saying, "We're on to you."
This is going to be in the paper.
Yeah,
in the
and
next
he knew
little
he
while.
was already on probation.
But here's the twist that's truly bizarre. Cox, the aspiring novelist, had written passages years earlier that he now seemed to be living almost word for word in real life.
Panic set in for the first time. How in the hell had the FBI gotten involved? Someone must have tipped them off. But who?
He wouldn't go back to his house because he was afraid that they'd pick him up there. If he was going to get picked up again, he was going to prison.
Matthew Cox was about to ask that same question again, the one he'd asked Allison Arnold.
He's like, "Will you come with me?"
And this time, the answer would be yes.
I'm trying to see if that was Bayshore, but
That's Bayshore. I think it is. No, that looks like from Davis Island.
Former business acquaintances like Scott Cugno were perplexed.
He had 60 properties at that time, give or take.
I don't know why they.
That's a lot to abandon.
Yes.
I guess he's the only one that would talk.
Allison Arnold knew exactly what had happened.
When I found out that he went on the run,
Yeah, I like her Suzanne Summers type voice.
I knew
When
everything was going to be exposed.
Or,
I like to get a tour.
after all, Cox's new Confederate Rebecca Hauck was willing to do whatever Allison was not, and especially to leave her son, 13-year-old Bryce, and go on the run.
Don't look at me like that.
But you know, for them to say that, puts like they're trying to take all burden off of her.
Right. Yeah. But listen. Look.
When I found out that he went on the run, I felt like I wanted to die inside because I knew everything was going to be exposed.
Or would it? After all, Cox's new Confederate Rebecca Hauck was willing to do whatever Allison was not, and especially to leave her son, 13-year-old Bryce,
But listen.
and go on the run.
Bryce was actually going to visit my mom for Christmas, so I had already gotten him a ticket to go.
So when you took him
Oh, it was horrible.
to the airport,
I was just like crying. I wouldn't let him go. It's like, "I'll be back in 2 weeks. What's going on?" Because I was, so upset.
Days after they left,
So look. Here's what happened was she brought her son, she brought her son to the airport and drops him off and sends him off. And she comes back and she's like, "I want to come with you." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, you have parents here that love you, and you've got a son. You've got a job. She worked for a casino interest at the dog track.
Right.
So you got a job. Like, what are you doing? What are you talking about?" And she said, "I said, what about your son?" And she said, "You don't understand." She said, like, her son's father her ex-husband had actually raised Bryce. She just picked him up to come to Florida. So he came to Florida. She put him in school. And she's like, I wanted to try and kind of raise him. Like the ex-husband had got remarried, new kids. So she's like, let him come with me.
Right.
So the ex-husband's like, okay, can you handle him? Absolutely. He goes to Florida with her, puts him in school. The kid has been picked up twice after curfew, sneaking out. He's been caught smoking pot, and she smokes pot. He's stealing her pot. So
13.
Yeah. So she's like, look, you don't understand. She's like, I put him on a plane. He's going back anyway for Christmas. She's like, I can't handle him. He was going to go back and stay after the school year. I was going to send him back to live with his father anyway. I can't handle him. She's a full-time. She works full-time.
Right.
She's like, I can't handle him. He's 13. He's it's out of my control. He's uncontrollable. So she said, the only difference now is this. I'm putting him on a plane now. I'm just not going to pick him up. It's like he was going to go in a few months anyway. So she explains this whole thing to me. And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, so I should have said no. And I did say no over and over again. But after a day or two, like, think about it. If you're up and leaving everything and everybody you know, like I'm leaving my son, my ex-wife, we were just very good friends. But, she was a big part of my life at that time. She's living with somebody, they're engaged. But my parents, everything. So I'm going to be alone. And I was okay with going and being alone, but this girl's begging to come with me. And I'll never forget, bro. I'm like, you have a life here. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to leave. Nobody's looking for you. She goes, you don't even know why I moved here. And I was like, what do you mean? She'd only been here a month or two.
Right.
She said, I used to work in Vegas. She said, for a lawyer. She said, the lawyer I was working for found out I'd embezzled like $20,000 from him. She lost it playing gambling. So she has like a gambling addiction. She goes, he found out and he said, I'm going to send you, I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to send you to, because he worked for casino interests. Right. There's a company I work for. I'm going to send you down to Florida and they'll give you a job. I've already called. He didn't want to call the police because he was sleeping with her and he's married. So his fear was, I call the police and she gets arrested and it becomes a thing. My wife's going to figure out that I'm sleeping with her. So here's what we're going to do. You don't owe me the money. I'm sending you down there. They paid for her to come down there. She brings Bryce with her. She meets me. I say, I'm going on the run. And she says, look, she's like, you don't even know why I'm here. I'm here because, and she explains that whole thing. So while she's explaining it to me, I remember thinking, you're right. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're like, now that I do, like now you're an adulteress, thieving, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly.
You're checking the boxes?
Check. I'm like, you're looking like a decent partner at this point, where before you're this sweet, nice girl who's like a secretary.
Right. And your concern is like what I'm going to be doing. Like, I don't feel like having to justify that in your eyes.
Correct. So
let me go. But then she's like, oh no, really? And,
really?
And you're like, might be an asset. Let's do this.
You just turned, exactly. She just turned into an asset. And I was like, and the big thing is also, and I don't want to, lie or make this seem like it wasn't a big factor. I don't have to be alone. It's not that I'm unable to be alone because I was leaving no matter what. Like she comes in, I'm packing. And we hung out for the weekend because I had to run up all my credit cards, get out as much cash as I could. And I'm packing my stuff. And I waited till like the last minute, like Sunday night, because I figured they're going to raid my office on Monday.
Right.
They don't work on weekends. They actually raided it maybe 2-3 days later. But I just remember thinking, I got to get out here before Monday. So we take off on Monday. But that was it. Like I was thinking, there was multiple reasons now you're reasonable. And 2, I don't have to be alone. And it would be easier. She was like, this will be way easier. And I had to explain to her, look, I don't have any money. I got like $80,000 in cash. She's like, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go steal a few $1 million. That's what I'm going to go to. And she was like, well, I could help you. And I was like, she's like, wouldn't it be easier if you had help? And I was like, it would be easier, but I don't need you. I can still do it.
Right.
It makes it adds a little bit, a different level of difficulty, but I can still do it. But you're right. It was easier. So,
and she's good cover.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got somebody to open additional bank accounts. You have there's lots of other things, somebody to return phone calls, somebody to say, if somebody's calling to verify your employment, she can answer, she can verify it, she can call back a woman as opposed to me calling back trying to disguise my voice. Yeah, exactly.
Right. All the way down the list.
Check,
top to bottom.
Right.
And the bottom one, sex.
There is that.
a hard-hitting expose outlining some of Cox's alleged
swindles appeared in
God,
the
I'm
St. Petersburg
wondering where they're getting all
Times.
these pictures.
Headline,
dubious deals, all those dozens of properties, and so much more about Matthew Cox were not all that they seemed. Law enforcement went into gear. Warrants were issued. But a manhunt? No. And nobody in Tampa had the slightest idea that Matthew Cox and Rebecca Hauck were in Atlanta, and soon were setting up shop in this Tony apartment building.
We had to get new identities, so we just went to dinner one night, made up a name.
She became Grace Hudson. And Cox, well, he drove across the border to Alabama, walked into this DMV, and the dyslexic artist who developed an amazing ability to copy signatures.
Is that Alabama?
doctored a few documents and
Did I say Alabama?
himself into,
Yeah.
shall
No.
we say,
Gerald Scott.
Right. So listen to what he said though. Like he's making this up. Like he said he had a remarkable ability
to forge signatures?
Like all you need is a forged signature to get somebody's license. It doesn't make sense. Like, it's like,
well, but he's talking to the general public, man.
And they don't know any better, right?
Exactly. They don't, the intricacies, anyway, they don't concept the intricacies.
Right.
We do. Like if someone just told you, like, hey, I'm going to rob the bank, you're thinking, okay, who's driving the getaway car? You got the bags, you got the route, you got the plan. You know what I'm saying? You think of all those things. He's talking to the general public who thinks, hey, I'm going to rob a bank. Oh, well, let's go.
Right. So, yeah. Well, anyway, Scott Cugno.
Yes.
I had his information because I'd done a loan for him at one point. I just happened to keep it with me.
There you go.
An old friend.
I couldn't believe that this was happening.
Cox, it turned out, had volunteered to handle Scott Cugno's mortgage a couple of years earlier. And now, to his horror, Cugno discovered his former friend had used all that precious and secret personal information for his own dirty work.
He took my identity and bought houses, a car, and some credit cards.
How much did he steal using your name?
I think it's like $50,000.
It's like 400,000 I cashed.
game was on.
I don't know how come he didn't know
Rebecca was
that.
getting a crash course in fraud. Her first assignment.
That book Cox had written, The Associates.
Anyone can steal money and run, but disappearing forever is extremely difficult. They need driver's licenses and credit cards.
Did you know that he had written a book?
No, and when I read it, I was just floored. I mean, I couldn't believe it. As we got on the run together, I saw how he did things, and it all referenced back to how the book was.
And here,
Did she read the book?
She did read the book, but they're leaning into the narrative.
Just like this one, they did rent in an Atlanta suburb. Next, the fictional character opened accounts at several banks in the area to launder the cash that was to come. Cox did just that. Then, just as his character had, Cox forged a document and filed it at the courthouse, claiming the mortgage on the home was paid off.
And then he'd start hitting high-end lenders and telling them that he owned the property free and clear.
Lenders, like John Holman, who had no idea he was playing the part of the fictional dupe.
I loaned this fellow over $100,000 on a home that it turns out he didn't own.
A private investor named Sam Dobrow also made a loan.
You've lost something like $75,000, $80,000.
Right, and my partner who's in this with me has another $50,000.
They all got paid back, by the way.
Like by the system?
The system.
Yeah.
By the title company. So really they should have some title company people sitting there. But those would be nameless people. You don't want the nameless people. You want to put a face to it.
Right.
It was so funny too because when I was being sentenced, the one guy shows up and the U.S. attorney is it talks about Mr. Holmes. He lent Mr. Cox $100,000 and he lost $100,000 and he couldn't afford to lose that money. And so he leans into it and he says, and she goes, what? All of it? Yeah. She goes, they paid you back all of it? He's like, yeah, they paid me back all of it. And she's like, you didn't lose anything? And he goes,
they're saying this at the time?
They're saying this right in front, the microphone. She's like, you didn't lose anything? And he's like, and keep in mind, this has got the whole courtroom's full of reporters. And he's like, no. She's like, did you have to hire a lawyer? He's like, Yo, yeah, I did. She goes, well, what did that cost? He goes, that was about $1,500. She's like, well, that's a lot of money. You couldn't afford to lose $1,500, could you? He goes, no, I couldn't. No, I couldn't. It went from 100,000 to 15.
100.
1,500 went from 100,000 to $1,500. Yeah. So,
not even 15,000.
Yeah. Which I feel bad about.
Of course.
In real
Well, you don't
life,
feel bad about it going that
they
down,
hit
that low.
Tallahassee, where Rebecca got more involved. Now it was she who claimed to own this house. She who went to the closing under another stolen identity. Was there some point at which he said, okay, you're in it as deep as I am?
On our drive home, he's like, well, you're in it. You've done it.
So now you're Bonnie of Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
This guy's so annoying.
Oh, yeah. She didn't even like that. She didn't like that. Your mother.
Carefree American holiday.
But as she got in deeper, things began to change.
I think that was Jamaica.
Even before Jamaica, the romance had cooled. Cox, who at 5'6", could never be mistaken for Brad Pitt or George Clooney.
Look at
So
that
mean.
gut. Look at that's not you.
Tell me, you'd be perfect if you just had some plastic surgery done. Breast implants.
You didn't want breast implants, right?
Do you see the leading? You didn't want them, right?
Of course not.
Motherfucker.
You think I want bigger boobs so men would pay attention to
Are you
me?
serious?
No.
She's the one who, listen, the funny thing is that was her money. Like, she's like I paid for them. I didn't pay for them. You got part of the money. We just borrowed $50,000 or $100,000 or $300,000. You've got your chunk of money. She said, I'm getting a boob job. She
Well,
wanted to get a
didn't
boob
want
job.
them, Matt.
I know.
She wanted to be insignificant.
I don't think small-breasted women are insignificant.
Well, that's how she wanted. And she's ruined. She's stuck with boobs now. Nice, perky, attention-grabbing boobs. You're a monster.
She got
I feel bad.
a $15,000 job at this plastic surgery center outside Atlanta. Well, then why do you allow yourself?
Because I wanted him to want me. I wanted him, because he kept telling me he wasn't physically attracted to me. Everything
Who
I tried
says
to do
that?
was trying to make him
Well,
want to
I've
be
said
with me.
that.
But
No, still no. I just was flabbergasted. What do I have to do? I gave up my family, my life, my kid. You know, I
Sometimes that makes me upset to hear.
show you how much you mean to me when you're telling me I'm never going to be good enough for you.
Stop. Will you stop with the we got to get through this. You stop with the judgment. Like, I never said that. That's not true.
I don't think you did say that.
Okay.
I don't think. Listen, I had the same situation with Winter's mom. So I
Right.
mean, I don't think.
I know they hear things that like aren't true. Like, when did I say that? That's what you're thinking.
And
What?
they fixate it as the truth.
Right.
So
Okay.
But if she was in some ways trapped in this cage, it was certainly a gilded one. So you lived in a great apartment.
Mm-hmm. Drove a G35 Infinity.
Had great clothes, makeup, hair.
Exactly.
Nails done.
Everything.
But slowly, Rebecca Hauck was coming to realize that despite all the trappings, life in the shadows,
Tampa.
always looking over her shoulder, was not so glamorous after all. And things were heating up. Atlanta area lenders who'd been stiffed began alerting authorities about Cox's schemes.
The number of victims, the number of stolen identities used, the number of prior mortgages that are erased, all of that.
I'm falling asleep here.
That's very unique.
Who is that?
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gail McKenzie of Atlanta.
That's Gail.
That was good.
Very good. We once were within 3 weeks of capturing him. We were that close.
The Fed seized bank accounts,
That doesn't
and
sound
they say
close.
they grabbed several
United
$100,000 of Cox's ill-gotten gains before he had a chance to get at it.
Before he had a chance to launder it, yes.
So he would have known you were pretty close at that point.
He knew we were very close at that point.
Federal agents say their real names are 35-year-old Matthew Cox and 33.
That was in the Tampa paper.
News stories began.
When I was in jail, I remember reading it going, this guy is the bomb.
By the fugitive.
My picture was everywhere on the news. And I got really scared then.
And yet, once again, Matthew Cox gave his pursuers the slip. He and Rebecca headed north to Columbia, South Carolina, where with a new stolen identity, Gary Sullivan, he bought this house.
In our case, he closed on 6 loans.
in the span of a few days for our property, and another house also closed on 5 to 6 loans within the span of a week.
Dr. Bruce Brown and his wife were leaving the Army, selling their first home, when they met Cox.
So we're talking about a dozen closings in a week?
All with separate attorneys, separate real estate agents.
And different identities in many.
Different identities.
The prankster in Christian couldn't help but add a flair to the forgeries.
So brazen was Cox that on one mortgage he even was said to have signed the name C. Montgomery Burns.
Excellent.
Was it arrogance? Hubris? Maybe it was simple karma then, that the luck which greased this long string of scams was about
I like
to
those
run.
pictures.
See that hairline?
Yes, you're in the bank, just
Oh yeah. Oh, they have
cruising
pictures
the
of me like
cameras.
looking right at the camera, like
Yes.
Rebecca Hauck and the mortgage fraud mastermind Matthew Cox had been on the run for 18 months, weaving their way north from Tampa, suspected of juggling dozens of identities, including those stolen from former acquaintances.
I believe he's a genius.
Forging documents,
That's
taking
true.
money out of
That part-
homes,
that part's
leaving
true.
homeowners and lenders fighting over the chaos.
It's a chess game, and every time he walks out of closing, it's checkmate.
And remember, Cox had also left behind the woman who'd become his first accomplice. And while Cox and his new partner
Not my first
ran,
accomplice.
Allison Arnold was increasingly haunted by the crimes she'd helped commit. Just like a character in that novel Cox had written years before.
they're really pushing
This
the novel,
poor girl
huh?
was trapped in a spot Houdini couldn't have gotten out of. It was very possible she may spend the next 15 to 20 years in federal prison.
Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. And so she picked up the phone and called the FBI before the Bureau came to her.
They would have knocked on my door, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to get it over with. I knew that what goes up must come down.
But Matthew Cox had no such fear. The step-by-step schemes that investigators said he'd laid out years earlier, in a novel of all things, had worked out perfectly. His take? Authorities estimated some $5 million. Does he think other people are stupid?
Yeah, he thinks he's smarter than everybody.
And then one
Do you
day,
see the
in
leading?
the spring of 2005, Rebecca was briefly alone, and her phone rang.
He called me and said, "You may have to be on your own. I've just been picked up." And I was distraught. I could not even fathom what would happen to me if he wasn't there.
Finally,
This is
it had
being
happened.
trapped in the bank.
A sharp-eyed court clerk in Columbia, South Carolina, had noticed Cox had put several mortgages on 2 houses in a matter of days. A fraud alert was issued on one of his money-laundering bank accounts. And here are the photos of Cox inside the very bank where his luck was about to run out. He was taken into custody just outside.
He actually got
was
taken to
inside.
the police department, and they had him in custody.
This is where they brought him, to the Richland County Sheriff's Department in Columbia, South Carolina. The end of one audacious crime spree. Or was it? The man deputies were questioning told them his name was Gary Lee Sullivan, which was, in fact, one of his 30 or so fake IDs.
It's Gary Lee Sullivan.
And since there was no warrant,
This is one of my favorite stories.
$1.3 million.
they let him go. Matthew Cox simply walked away. How frustrating was that for you?
Extremely frustrating.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gail McKenzie. So close.
So very close.
Cox is slipped away.
Well, what's in here?
And he soon rejoined Rebecca, but she knew
My favorite line.
her face, she knew, had shown up on wanted posters. And she'd recently caught Cox trolling the very spot where he'd found her, Match.com. That could mean only one thing. He was looking for a new accomplice.
A new accomplice.
She was finished.
And as we're driving, he's like, "We need to do this again." I'm like, "No, I'm not going to do this again." I go, "I can't do this. Enough's enough. It's over." And I think that's when it clicked with him that I wasn't going to do it anymore.
Oh, wait. None of that's true. Like, none of that's true. No, I'm done. I'm getting a regular job.
Yes, I'm
That's
quitting and
not
going
what
back and
happened.
getting my kid.
No, not what
I'm
happened.
going back to broke, baby.
What really happened was
Like, you better not leave me, MF. Who the hell do you think you are?
we get into an argument, and I'm like, look, I say we just split up the money, and she didn't want to split up the money. I had like $600,000, and 500,000 or 600,000. I don't know what she kept. I know that I got 100,000 and left.
And you left it with 500?
Yeah. I mean, we argued. I wanted like all of it, but then I also knew she was threatening, like, "Hey, I'll call the police. I'll do this. I'll do that." And going to prison, everybody, when you tell them the story, everybody's like, "Why didn't you just kill her?" And I'm like, "Because I'm not a murderer." And I'm like, "That's your go-to move? Buy a big suitcase?"
Isn't that weird? That is weird. Like, because in our life, that's just never an option,
right?
And then everybody else is like, I mean, that seems like the only answer.
You talk to a drug dealer or like these real bank robbers and stuff. They're like, "Why didn't you just kill her?" I'm like, "Well, what?" And they're like, "You buy a big suitcase, you put her in the suitcase, you wheel her into the it's like what? How is that? Yeah, how is that an option? They're like, that never even occurred to me.
Exactly. That's weird. I hate it when that happens.
Well, I don't want to say it didn't occur to me, but I didn't go with it.
It didn't occur to you. I know it didn't occur to you. It didn't occur to me. I thought my situation was worse, and it never occurred to me. It never occurred to me. I know it did.
You keep bailing her out. Yeah. God, what a girl. Okay, let's just keep going. All right, we got to get through this, man.
Okay.
To an argument, I had went and gotten in the bath, and he left everything.
Once, he'd swept her off her feet, showered her with clothes and cash, diamonds, and she says made her his partner in crime. And now he was simply gone.
Would you have stayed with him right through to the end?
I had every intention when I left with him to the end.
Stick it out no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Go down in a blaze of glory.
Yeah.
Really be Bonnie and Clyde. That was a romantic image in a way, wasn't it?
I wanted to be loved unconditionally. I wanted, yeah.
So why are you leading?
Rebecca found
You're leading the story.
Now in Houston, where they had come to find new victims. Instead, Rebecca settled into a quiet life on the lam. She made new friends, changed her hair color, and once again picked a new name.
What did they know you as?
Rebecca Sue Hickey.
And as Rebecca Sue Hickey in Houston, she says, she went straight. She worked.
Can I mention something? I like how they say she picked a new name. You mean she and I stole some identities.
And she grabbed one.
And she got a license in that name and set herself up in that name. Like she chose it. You stole an identity and got a driver's license. Like I'm okay with it, but it's so funny. If I do it, it's stolen identity. You ruin someone's life. If she does it, she just chose another name.
Yeah, some random two words that she put together. But go ahead.
She was a bartender, attended cosmetology school. For nearly a year, she says, she lived and worked and pined for her son. And waited. And then one day, in March 2006, the Secret Service came walking into that cosmetology school. By March 2006, Rebecca Hauck had been on her own in Houston for nearly a year, since the day fraud artist Matthew Cox drove out of her life. Rebecca Sue Hickey, as she was known to her friends.
Listen, I was up very late, so I'm sorry. But I'm still attentive. You're like, what the heck?
I just felt like I was scared, but I felt this big relief. Like, you know what? Let's start it. This is the beginning of the end. Let me just get this done.
2.5 years after Rebecca Hauck and Matthew Cox began papering the South with phony mortgages, stealing from property owners and banks and title companies from Florida to Georgia and South Carolina, one half of
that's the Tampa paper,
right?
Oh, that's the Atlanta Journal, but that's the same article.
Fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy. She was sentenced to almost 6 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay back more than $1 million. She sat down with us for an interview at the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta.
I want to believe in love, but you got to love yourself. You can't let somebody else manipulate you the way that.
You just turned over your life to him.
Oh, it's complete. My body, my life, my spirit, everything to him.
Oh my God.
Victim?
I feel I am, but I also know that I'm responsible for what I did do.
They
as soon as you say
told her to say that.
Yeah.
They told her to say that.
Yeah. So you, in federal court, like a big part of your sentence, you can get time off if you just say, I accept responsibility.
Yes.
So you have to say, you can't go in there saying, well, I feel like I'm a victim. The judge will be like, yeah, you're losing your 2 points of acceptance of responsibility. Like you're going to do another year.
And she might have wanted to pay all the people back before they passed. So it's, it's
maybe.
Whatever. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Sure, I'm an adult. I made a bad decision that I know, and I've hurt people too because of it.
Do you know how many lives you and he have impoverished? How many financial lives are thrown into turmoil?
Stop. We gotta stop. Listen. When he talks to me, he says ruined. You hurt a lot of people. With her, it's impoverished. First of all, who lost? I can't even get into this. Like it's not like
it's too extreme. But you'll be making excuses.
I would be making excuses instead of taking responsibility. But the bottom line is this: is that like the Browns lost like $10,000 or $12,000, and granted they shouldn't have. They paid an attorney $10,000, and then they had to pay a mortgage payment. So I think they lost like $12,000. So Dr. Brown is a doctor. I didn't impoverish him. Like, did it harm him? Did he have to spend some money? Yes, and I feel bad about that, and I'm paying restitution. The other one was a CPA who had his own CPA firm who had like 15 employees. I have a hard time. He paid about $4,500. And then the other guy is the guy who lost $1,500. And who's a hard money lender.
Does he interview you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to be the good part. So it's important to pay attention to the different analogies that he uses on each.
Do you know that?
Yeah. I think about that a lot.
But did you at the time?
No, because he would make me believe that that's why their title companies are there, to pay the people off. They're not going to be in trouble.
Well, where does that money come from? Whose money is that?
I know. And not
some big nameless corporation that nobody worries about.
Exactly.
Was that the idea?
A penny from every person, he would say. And not knowing so much about mortgage and mortgage fraud. A penny from every person. I believed him.
Of course, Rebecca Hauck is not the only woman who fell for Matthew Cox.
I trusted him with, my life, basically.
There was.
I'm starting to dislike me.
Allison Arnold, who seemed to realize.
Well, at least you can join us.
Allison was to turn herself into the FBI and offer a full confession, pleading guilty to numerous charges, including conspiracy to commit bank fraud and identity theft. The result? She was ordered to pay $300,000 in restitution to her victims, and she was sentenced to 2 years behind bars.
That's unbelievable they gave her that much time.
This price you paid?
Yes, it's worth it because before turning myself in, I was living more in prison than I do today.
Do you want to hear something not funny?
What?
So there's like 15 people indicted on my my indictment. So like I'm named. Everybody else is just an unnamed co-conspirator. They just do the initials like Allison Arnold, AA, Dave Walker, DW. And the purpose for that is that these are people that are involved, but we don't have enough to get a grand jury to indict them. And they're waiting to catch me.
Right.
The only person out of all those people, now all of them cooperated. They all came in or said, look, I'll talk to you. Matt did this, Matt did this, Matt did, like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. The only person that came forward, everybody else said, like, I knew he was doing stuff, but I didn't help him. The only person that came forward and said, listen, I was involved. I want to give a full confession. She's scared that they're going to show up one day and arrest her, was Allison Arnold. Allison Arnold, out of all those people, is the only one that goes to jail. Because she went to the federal government and said, I'll confess. Just let me get this over with. Everybody else that said, yo, bro, that lied to the FBI and said, oh, I don't know what's going on. I don't know I know he was doing something over here. I remember he asked me to sign a document. I don't really remember exactly what it was. He's my boss. I didn't know what it was. He just told me to sign it. Or that kind of bullshit. Like he was doing this, it's all his fault. I didn't do anything. I didn't know about anything. I was as shocked as anybody. None of them go to prison. Get indicted, anything. All of them go on to work in real estate attorney. They're all still brokers, everything. She goes to prison.
So,
what is the moral of the story?
That, or it highlights the fact when lawyers tell you not to talk to the police, And when you're, okay, tell us what happened, and you make it better on yourself, and how they add in. So if I were to give up like a Kobe, right? And so now I'm responsible for my drugs and Kobe's drugs. So then if Kobe gives up, someone else, then I'm responsible for my drugs, Kobe drugs, and whoever's drugs Kobe gets. It's just like when you do that, they just add on. Yeah. So never talk to them. I mean, this is what we learned in the Fed system, that it's all about who talks.
Well, keep in mind too that the thing with her is that when she went in with a lawyer, and they told her, like, we can't promise you this.
Oh my God. What were they not promising her?
But that we'll file a 5K1 and you won't have to do any prison time. Like, don't worry, nobody wants you to go to prison. You're the one who's coming forward. You're helping us. Nobody wants you to go to prison.
But did she help him, or she just told on what she did?
Well, she told what I did and what she did, and what everybody else did too, by the way. With her alone, they could have arrested these other people. She told them what everybody did. The point is that what happens is they changed prosecutors. And when they changed prosecutors, the new U.S. attorney said, that deal's off, send her to prison. Because it wasn't a promise. It wasn't a promise. You didn't have anything in writing. We said, we don't want you to jail. We will file a 5K1 once this guy's arrested, once all these people do. And with your help, we can do that. And she said, okay. But then at some point he said, yeah, they grabbed Cox. We're not going to go after any of these people. She's already pled guilty. Send her to prison. And she's saying, I wasn't supposed to go to prison. I'm not supposed to go to prison. You said I didn't have to go to prison. They said, well, we didn't promise you. We said we'd try.
2 years.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine what it must be like to be Matt, living under a completely different alias, and
it was great.
Damaging more people, hurting more people, stealing from middle-class America.
I don't know about all that part, but
you didn't ever have fear of getting caught,
no, except for when the handcuffs were on me.
Oh well.
And then I talked my way out of them. They took them off me. I was like, oh, I got you.
Who was that?
That is
the Tennessee girl.
Yes, that is. Oh my God! Amanda. That was Amanda. Amanda Gardner.
Now, one thing remained: to catch her accomplice in fraud, the accused conman behind it all, Matthew Cox.
Can you explain the hair? What is that picture of you with the long hair?
So I was balding, and those are photos of me before I left, or some of them were on the run, but before I had a hair transplant. So, I'm balding way back here, and I got this little patch of hair, so I'm parting it to try and cover the balding. And then, once you've got a couple 100,000, it's like, why don't I just get a hair transplant? I'll be honest, is Becky, look, so Becky and Allison.
Oh.
Becky and Allison. I'll be honest. I liked Allison. She was very sweet. Becky, she drove me nuts, bro. She was bipolar. She was a maniac. She was a pain in the ass. Amanda, I was absolutely in love with Amanda.
Wow.
And for years later, sitting in prison, heartbroken.
Really?
Yeah.
She wouldn't even talk to you.
No. I got one letter from her. She's married now. She's married with some guy, and several of these programs have reached out to her trying to talk to her. She won't talk to him. Probably for good reason.
It's the money in the game.
U.S. Attorney Gail McKenzie's manhunt had now gone nationwide. Law enforcement was alerted to his many aliases and the habits that could give him away. His love for vanilla lattes at Starbucks, movies about criminals, the habit of painting huge murals in a very specific style, the method using young single mothers as accomplices.
This guy.
More than likely then, some other young woman is setting herself up for a stay in a federal prison somewhere.
That is a real possibility.
And then, out of the blue, there was news. On the very week Rebecca Hauck was sentenced in Atlanta, a tip from Nashville, Tennessee, just 200 miles away. It was a babysitter who said she'd heard something about a man she'd worked for. He called himself Joseph Carter from Florida, she said. He lived with this single mother. Secret Service agents scrambled to his home in Nashville and found it was empty. Matthew Cox was gone.
Where was Matthew Cox? Had somebody tipped him off? Well, in fact, the truth was too strange to make up. Just days before, Cox had learned what it was like to become the victim of a crime. Armed robbers had burst into his house, had stolen watches, cash, a car, an Infiniti, of course. And Cox became so worried that somebody was after him that he scooped up his new girlfriend and her young son and moved into a hotel.
He said he would take care of me. He said he would take care of my
interview
son,
her.
that he would try his best to make sure that we were happy.
Her name is Amanda Gardner. She said she and Cox, or Carter as she knew him, had set up a home remodeling
Carter was your first
business,
name?
the Nashville Restoration
It's actually the last
Project.
name. I just went by
Check
Carter.
out this remodeled home. Recognize the murals on the wall?
I was completely and totally dumbstruck in love.
Amanda had settled down with this man
Oh,
who took her to Greece on vacation, loved crime movies, vanilla lattes from Starbucks, and sure enough, asked her to have breast enhancement surgery.
Untrue.
Did she?
Fox and Amanda returned home.
Did she have?
No.
Where they were hiding.
No, because I think he said that.
The Secret Service called one of its most
Like he said that. She never did.
On November 16, 2006, just like that, Matthew Cox was caught, taken down by Secret Service agents who'd been searching for him for 2 long years.
Every time they said my name, I felt like I was gonna, my legs were gonna drop out from underneath me.
This is locked up in the U.S. Marshals holdover.
Today, now sitting in the
Oh my God.
behind bars, where we
You weren't cuffed when you talked to him?
No, they took him
more
off.
than a year before.
I remember thinking, had it just been the regular police, I probably would have thought I've got a chance. But the Secret Service, they had me. They had me.
Had him, he says, because Amanda had discovered his true identity, then somehow let the secret slip to a friend.
I was curious to know why you didn't just leave the country, run away, and kept doing those crazy murals, which was so obviously you.
I love those murals.
Can you go back in your mind and tell me what you're thinking at that point? Like, how long were you in jail?
Listen, I'd been in jail at least about 7, maybe 8 months by then, because to do this interview, they had to move me. The U.S. attorney had to have me moved from Union City County Jail, right, or Union City Jail, to the Atlanta City Detention Center, because Union City wouldn't let them interview me. So they moved me to Atlanta City Detention Center. They would let them interview me.
So you knew it was coming. They're asking you.
Oh no, keep in mind, the U.S. attorney is the one who asked me to be interviewed. Like, I want him to be interviewed by Dateline, because then they're going to play the episode again. Keep in mind, the first episode,
That chick wanted you to be interviewed.
yeah, the U.S. attorney, Gail McKenzie. So keep in mind, the first time they end it with, he's still on the run. So that doesn't make him look good, does it? This way, you just heard all that, and guess what? They got him. She looks pretty good now.
So, so what were you thinking?
I'm thinking, first of all, this guy was a douchebag, by the way.
Oh,
complete douchebag. And the way he talked was, he talked just like in person, like when the cameras are on or off, he really talks like that. Hello, Matthew. How are you? He kept saying,
like in the what's the second movie, Poltergeist, where the old guy,
that old creepy guy.
Yes.
So, hello. I mean, just weird. It was just, he says these ridiculous things. Even when the cameras weren't on, he was saying weird stuff. He would say, it's very, I don't know, it's corny true crime to me. It's like, it's just very corny. He's a corny guy. And he would say these things and the whole thing, just like when he's talking to me and interviewing me, he's like, you've hurt a lot of people. And I went, well, I mean, I financially inconvenienced some people. I haven't physically harmed anyone. He goes, you've hurt a lot of people. And I went, what? I didn't physically hurt anybody. And he goes, you hurt a lot of people. And I go, okay, well, you seem to be hung up on hurt. I said, so, okay. I go, yes, I've hurt a lot of people. And they cut all that out. It becomes, you've hurt a lot of people. And I go, yes, I've hurt a lot of people. I mean, it's literally.
Oh my God. The chopping job. Oh my God.
I think that might be an American greed. That may be here.
I left the country a few times and came back. I remember Every place I thought that I would be able to disappear to, I remember being terrified that if I went there, you know, you go to Mexico and a gringo shows up with $1 million in cash, he's going to get it taken away from him.
So Cox, against his better instincts, stayed in Nashville, fell in love, tried to go legit, he says, but fell back to his old money-making schemes.
Nashville Restoration
and
Project.
habits, which by now were as comfortable as old shoes.
Did you ever stop going to Starbucks?
No.
What was the drink? I forget now.
Venti vanilla latte with 5 raw sugars.
There you go.
They don't serve those here.
So it's possible to do without them.
It is. Yeah, it's possible to do without all kinds of things. You'd be surprised.
In the end,
That's a shell of the old Matt. I'm gonna tell
Oh,
you
God,
that.
right? Oh, I was crushed, bro.
His eyes light up when he talks about that close call back in Columbia, South Carolina, when he and Rebecca had briefly separated and police picked him up on suspicion of bank fraud and were one simple question away from ending his long run. He had been banking that day, illegally of course, using stolen ID.
And he comes back and he says, yep, he's got a valid driver's license in Nevada. And he said everything checks out. He goes, well, it says he's 5'11". And they all of them look at me at the same time. And I'm clearly not 5'11". And I said, well, with a good pair of shoes. And they all started laughing. I gave him my business card, told him to call me as soon as he found out anything. I got into my vehicle. I went to 2 more banks, got out some more money, and
They cut the whole part about me being brought to the police
South
station.
Carolina, never to go back.
How'd that feel driving away?
I know my lawyer doesn't want me to say this, but I was very happy. Granted, when we left, there was $700,000 in the bank. But that $700,000 was nothing compared to walking away.
But why did he do it? With all his talent and his head for numbers? In fact, said Cox, he'd gotten in over his head. He should have declared bankruptcy after his initial misdeeds back in Florida. But he'd learned about all these tempting loopholes in mortgage rules and discovered that lots of people were all too willing to give him sensitive information.
They would give me where they were born and their mother's maiden name, and there's just no reason to give that information out.
Did you ever say, okay, I know I'm about to do something that's really extremely wrong, immoral, and makes me a bad person, but I'm going to do it anyway?
Yes, I'd love to say, oh no, that didn't cross my mind, or, you know.
Of course it crossed your mind.
But it obviously crossed my mind. And my whole justification for that was the banks will pay back the money, or the title companies will pay it back, and nobody will lose a significant amount of money, and ultimately no one will really get hurt other than title companies. Those were the types of things that I would tell myself that helped me sleep better at night. Yeah. And it still didn't work. I still didn't sleep very well.
Pretty convoluted rationalizations.
Yeah, well, I was taking a lot of Xanax, that helped.
What?
Without a doubt,
I had a prescription for Xanax. I've always had a prescription for
I did not know that.
Yeah. I don't think I was taking a lot of it, though.
No. You just said it.
Look.
I know I've hurt some people.
Look.
But
I'm about to do something that's really extremely wrong, immoral, and makes me
This is where he does the hurt thing. They
inconvenienced quite a few people.
Inconvenience is a very small word.
But then hurt, physically hurt.
I didn't say physically.
I know I've hurt some people.
did say physically,
But
but
I
that's
haven't
what they
stolen
cut.
any old ladies' pension funds or anything along those lines. I didn't think I was going to hurt any individuals.
Or was that your rationalization again?
I
You decided you could think that, even though
I really
maybe
believed, at the time, I really believed that. Seeing how things played out, I realized it didn't happen.
There was, by the way, one very personal message Cox had for us. Remember what Allison and Rebecca said, that he manipulated them, that he demanded they have breast implants and leave their kids? The women, claimed Cox, were willing partners in all of that, aware of the risks. And that title Dateline gave him, Thief of Hearts? Cox laughed about that. Explained he'd had plenty of male accomplices, too. But a few things were not a laughing matter. His father, for one.
He's going to go to the sentencing, which, you know, is great. And that, you know, my dad's going to go to my sentencing. That just seems so horrible. Can we stop for a second?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Out there somewhere.
Why did that touch you?
Just my dad. Just
for a dad.
I guess I'm hoping someday he'll want to know who his father is.
Oh, he's talking about yours.
No, he's talking about my dad.
And then your son.
Yeah.
But claiming she did nothing wrong. A woman he says he still loves.
Oh.
I'm hoping that'll pass eventually, because haven't heard from her lately. But I'm sure eventually all things heal with time.
And time is what Matthew Cox will have plenty of. Because unlike the
Ugly.
Oh, yeah. It's bad.
He's ugly, saying that.
He hadn't meant for anyone to get hurt.
people have been hurt. Authorities do consider him a criminal.
He was free and about to start a new adventure, a new life in a new country.
There'll be no
Doesn't
sailing
happen.
away on an ocean-bound cruise ship, no millions in cash, no girl by his side. Instead, only a guilty plea to dozens of counts of mortgage and
AC/DC,
bank
baby.
and
Yeah.
passport fraud, ID theft,
And you shook his hand.
probation violations. He is, finally,
Bro, what am I supposed to
just
do?
Matthew
You know?
Cox. And his
What do you do?
ambitions
Tell him go
have
fuck
diminished
yourself? He's got to edit this thing. Hoping to get a good
Someday
cut.
I'll get out there and I'll go on with my life, and maybe I'll be an artist.
And you didn't. But
Probably the only thing I'll be able to do.
Probably could have been
I think
worse.
I'll be equipped to get a job at McDonald's, even with.
I wanted to get a job at McDonald's when I got out.
I don't think they'd let me work the cash register.
In November 2007, Matthew Cox was sentenced to 26 years behind bars.
Ouch.
That's all for Dateline on ID.
Poor guy. He didn't
I'm
deserve
Lester
that.
Holt. Thanks for watching.
Seems unreasonable.
So the first thing I want to say is seeing you there, like I would have presumed that was like days after your arrest.
Bro, that's 7-8 months after my arrest.
I know, but I can knowing you all this time, I can see the hurt, not just on the part about your dad, but just the hurt of the whole situation of having to talk about. It's like I could tell you were still processing everything.
Bro, I hadn't been sentenced yet and hadn't been to a prison yet. Like all the scary stuff was still ahead of me, you know? So you're still like, look, like all my cockiness and arrogance, even what's left
was dimmed.
It's gone. It's
was
gone.
dimmed.
That's
Well,
me
it was there. It was just dim.
I'm like totally trying to be like humble and soft spoken, like all the things I'm really not. Like
Right.
that's what I was making. The worst thing was when I start kind of going back and forth with him on, okay, well, I haven't hurt anybody. You know what I'm saying? When I start doing that, I'm like, well, I haven't physically hurt anyone. When we go back and forth, my attorney is keep on the other side of the camera, and the look on her face is just like, what are you doing? Just say you've hurt people, move on. You're like, when I walked out, I'm like, oh man, I said that hurt thing. And because she came up and saw me later, I'm like, I shouldn't have said anything about hurt. She's like, no, you shouldn't have. She said, I'm sure it'll be fine. And of course, when they cut it up, anything decent that I said was kind of cut up.
Of course.
So
absolutely. I'm all those. I learned early that all those interviews and all that news stuff is like done for sensationalism.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And for the moral arch. And as you said, he softened words for her. But like that's what kind of touched me is seeing like you on the fresh end. Cause like I idolized you before I even met you because of what you had done. And to see you like fresh into the remorse part is I don't know, it's very humanizing for me, and because that Matt Cox,
it almost makes you seem human, is what I just heard.
That Matt Cox only existed for a small amount of time.
Very brief. Right? It was just up to maybe a couple days after sentencing.
That wasn't even the Matt I met when I was at Coleman, but go ahead.
You know what's funny is like my scam where I made the fake people and borrowed like they're like he got away with like $5 million, right? Like the $11.5 million, that scam, they don't even talk about it.
No.
They talk about, oh, you got like $1 million here. He was refinancing houses. He's running a little scam here, little scam there. They don't talk about like that massive scam because I think I think it's too many people. Maybe it's too many people. Maybe it's too complex for a very short. Like it's better for them to focus on these individual people. And like I said, the buzzword was single female or single mothers. So they had this guy who's getting single mothers to like, let's go with, that's the angle, not, hey, he's pulling off real estate scams. That's boring and it's hard to explain.
Well, because Dateline was more of the human side, whereas American Greed was more of the scam side. So this was more about the impact on people. And you know what I'm saying? They didn't go in depth about what you did at all. Like whereas American Greed, like you were signing mortgages for houses, and you know what I'm saying? They were taking it step by step. And this one is just kind of like, well, you took this person's information and you used it, and then you had this like, so it was trying to get on a personal level.
We'll have to do American Greed. Have we done American Greed?
I have not seen that.
I got American Greed too.
No, well, let's do it.
Hey, I really appreciate you guys watching the video. Do me a favor. If you liked it, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified. Also, if you want to see the entire 44-minute Dateline episode without Zack and I's commentary, and you just want to watch it, please consider joining my Patreon. You can join. You can watch the entire thing on Patreon. Thank you very much. It's only $10. I really do appreciate you guys watching. See you.